Good morning, friends. I realize that we are just 3 days out from the election, and lots of people are having different feelings and adjusting to how they plan to adjust to the new abnormal, so to speak. And I want to talk to you about what my intentions are here with Morning Gen Live. You know, the motto has always been that I offer hot takes on fresh news Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. And I've also had the view that this is about law, politics, and snark. Not much has changed, except if you notice this, that I have changed my banner to say law, politics, and hope, because I am always filled with snark. You can always count on me to add a dash of irony, to add a dash of sarcasm to my commentary. But I want you to know that now more than ever, we need hope. Now, so let me tell you, before we bring on my friend Jesse Eisinger, our guest at 8:30, and more on him in a moment, before I get to that, I need to talk with you about how I plan to engage with you here and in the world. And this is, and to explain this, I really need to emphasize the word intentional. And I really need to focus you on what I think the most important way for me, and maybe for you too, to move forward. And that is with absolutely clear eyes and information, and also not in a state of panic, or either in an ostrich state with our head buried beneath the ground. And what this also requires then is to check in on our own and temper our own reactivity. And what I mean by that is, before, when you see something on Twitter, or you see someone hateful say something offensive, before you share that with all of your friends, saying, look, this affirms everything we feared. Look, there is this rando person saying something sexist to someone, right? Or look, Nick Fuentes, the Nazi, is doing his Nazi stuff. Before you spend your time immediately looking at that, shaking your head in disgust or panic and sending it out to me, because I'm getting a lot of these, my friends, from you, or sending it out everywhere, I need you to step back and not be yourself a victim of what becomes both intentional and unintentional propaganda to create fear, not awareness, and to distort your critical thinking and rational abilities, and also to destroy your inner being and your mood. Okay, so I'm not ignoring. I just want to make clear what I'm saying. I will be reporting every day on what is happening in the news. I will be commenting on, in particular, the issues I focus on, law and politics, as well as, my emphasis is on follow the big dirty money, right? I wrote a book called Big Dirty Money. Our guest, Jesse Eisinger, wrote the book, The Chicken Shit Club, right? We go back as friends to 2014, right after the financial meltdown. I will be saying it like it is, and I will not be manipulated or follow in a herd what everyone else is doing. And in fact, the last few days, I have not watched cable news. I see little snippets of it. When it's repeated, I'll watch, as you know, I showed Kamala Harris's concession speech. I'm going to share with you today what Joe Biden had to say. But what I'm not going to do is fearmonger. It doesn't do any good. And I want to explain this to you. Again, this is my very intentional message to you. I'm not naive. I'm not trying to paper over anything that has happened. But what I am is trying to be measured. Okay, so I'm going to give you this example. Every year, a certain number of people die in car accidents, right? And this is the case. And it's an unbearable number, right? It just is. It is what it is. And I hate that expression, but here are the data. The National Safety Council provides the numbers of automobile deaths per year. And, the numbers were going down. I mean, I can share. I'm just going to do this so you can actually see this and why we won't be doing this every day. So I'm going to share my screen with you. And we're going to look at this number, right? And what we are, my friends, looking at here is a chart showing you historical car crashes and obviously in deaths per population. And the numbers obviously might be going up because we have more cars, and they might be going down because we have better hospitals and better safety measures inside of the cars. But we have the green line is a number of total deaths. And then the blue line is the rate per 100,000 population, right? So as the population grows, how is that change? Well, the good news is the blue rate is going down. It means that despite people driving more and there being more people, there are fewer deaths relative to the population. But still, we are looking at the number of deaths in 2022, and I'm clicking, it says number of deaths, 46,027, because that comes from over here. So let me just go back and I will remove, I'm going to stop sharing the screen. 46,000 people died in 2022 in car accident deaths. And every one of those lives was precious. And the effect of this rippled across families and communities, and even more people were injured. Now, I know this, but I am not going to come on this show every morning and show you a picture of a car accident and tell you the story of that. I'm not. I am not. And why? Well, why do you think? What good would that do? That would just evoke trauma, right, for you. Now, you might say, no, if I did that, maybe we would encourage people to drive more safely. Maybe automobiles would become more safe. Maybe people would walk more and not drive. Maybe people would drink less. Okay, I don't know what the correlation would be between me and the news media every single day reporting about how many accident deaths there are. We don't do it. Why? Because cars are going nowhere. I don't mean they are going somewhere. We're not going to get rid of automobiles. Safety standards hopefully will continue to improve. But I guess the point I'm making, here's my analogy. I will not be coming here to terrify you. I will not be coming here to point out every single instance of some homophobic, racist monster guy harassing somebody. I'm just not going to. I see the trend line there, right, in terms of the accidents. And I want you not to send me, if you're my friend, every single time you see a poster of someone holding a poster up, because they now are holding these signs up saying something like, your body, my choice. Okay, guys, good luck with that, right? I'm not going to do that because once again, that is expected. People have always been that way. That is not changing the trend line. If there is a change in the trend line, if we are seeing overwhelming changes and how that happens, will I discuss it? Yes. But that is not news and that is not commentary, and that's not going to help us. What's going to help us, I firmly believe, is looking at what's going on and being honest with ourselves about, regardless what system is in place, the same problems we share. And it is and I'm going to say this other thing, intentionality. It is my goal to be in community with you. And as I said yesterday, to be in community with my physically local geographic community and my families. And in that space, I plan to resist. I plan to resist fascism. Okay, so here I'm reporting and commenting, right? I am a commentator. I'm not a journalist. And in my life outside of StreamYard, outside of this YouTube channel, guys, I'm going to be doing what I do, which is being a daughter, a wife, a mom, a law professor, a community member, a loudmouth. I cannot help myself. I will continue to speak out and resist suffering and defend people as, in a legal sense, train lawyers who, if they choose to, will choose to stop the cycle of violence, to interfere in the efforts to implement the Trump agenda. Okay, now, next thing. So 1, I told you the intention here. 2, I told you kind of what my day-to-day will be. And 3, I want you to know that there is, of course, midterm elections in 2022. And I'm just going to hope that we have a situation where we can win back the Senate and hopefully keep the House. Now, I know the House, we have not decided, it's not been determined who has it, because votes are still being counted across the country. That is my hope. And what I won't do, though, is ever ask you to get up and do something. If you want to do it, great. I'll tell you about the opportunities, because this last piece, my 4th piece to say about this, and this kind of goes to the first intentionality. This show, when I launched it first on Mary Trump Media, when it was a video format, not live, and then that was in May, and when I moved it over to my own space here in August, and then briefly dipped over there. Again, this is about commentary. It's about hot takes on fresh legal and political news, Monday through Friday, right? I moved into more of an advocacy space because it was important to me to do what I could to use my platform for my beliefs. But I am not in an advocacy space here. I am in a commentary. I am in a community space with you. There is no spin. The hope comes from the hope of our humanity, right? No what they call copium or hopium here. This is just, we are together in this space. I just want to lay that out to you. And the sound is awesome this morning. Hey, AG. And so guys, thank you so much. I'm seeing lots of comments in the chat, and they're really good ones, like Elaine Good. Estimate $900 million cost to taxpayers for mass deportation. Kissy Cat, I don't know if Rosen won Nevada yet, but I do know Tammy Baldwin kept her seat in Wisconsin, and Elisa Stefanik secured that new seat in the Senate. So this is great. Hey, H.A. Vincenz, thank you that you love my message. Mary, you say I'm not a loud mouth. Well, I try to speak out where I can. Deb, one of the moderators. Yeah, she's reminding me, please subscribe. So I guess you like the show for today. You subscribe and click that the bell, so you always get a notice that I am here. Oh, okay. So again, before I get my friend Jesse on, I'm going to start, and I've got something to talk about, which is Merrick Garland. Got to do it, guys. Got to talk about how much he flubbed this, how much he dropped the ball, how I have from, I want to say, day one, and I have the receipts, warned and talked and tried to implore and spoke indirectly through my columns in the Washington Monthly to try to get him to step up the pace. That was not what he was going to do. And I will go to my grave believing, because it is empirically based, that if Merrick Garland had done what we asked him to do when he was sworn in March of 2021, which is at that point appointed a special counsel, right? A new special counsel, Mueller was done, a new special counsel to pick up where Mueller left off, because he did talk about, yes, there was that footnote. Yes, you can prosecute a president after they leave office. He should have appointed someone to manage that, as well as the insurrection fallout immediately. And I am dear friends with several people, in social media who say, oh, he couldn't do anything because the FBI was tainted. Nonsense. He could have cleaned house immediately. I know that if Sally Yates had been in that job, I know if a prosecutor like Larry Krasner had been in that job, they would have stepped up and enforced the law. But Merrick Garland said his number one objective, it was clear, whether he said it out loud or I heard it, because I did hear it in the news, as well as from my friends who worked in the Justice Department and knew what was going on. He wanted to, quote unquote, restore like impartiality to the Justice Department, restore the respect of the department so people wouldn't think it was biased in the way that Bill Barr had been interfering in so many things. And we'll talk about that in a moment. That's not his fucking job description. But he was more concerned about looking impartial and looking like he was creating some sort of paradise. So he would look like a good, impartial guy and not following the law. I don't know what kind of moron thought that a guy who staged a coup wasn't going to also try to run for office again, because Merrick Garland's excuse for appointing a special counsel 18 flipping months later, because that was when Donald Trump officially announced his campaign. Are you effing kidding me, man? But some men are arrogant, and I have had a particular personal beef against him, and I've never really told this story. And I'm going to try to say it in a way that I don't make other people feel bad. But I saw him in person when I was teaching, visiting at Harvard Law School in the fall of 2019. And we were, as a visiting faculty member, I was invited to the cocktail party before the moot court argument where the students do this. And usually for moot court, there is a U.S. Supreme Court justice who comes in to be the chief justice. But this was fall of 2019. And it was a time during which that was right after the news came out that Donald Trump was trying to extort Vladimir Zelensky. And I think there were some concerns at that point that there might be some legal decisions the Supreme Court might have to be making, et cetera, et cetera. And they didn't come. So who was the chief judge? They sent Merrick Garland. And it was raining out. And we were walking from the cocktail party in the dean's office under these tunnels at the Harvard Law School up to the place, the Ames court building, which is in a different building, but it's all these underground tunnels, fine. And while we were there, we were walking. And as you walk, as you're walking, underneath each building is, you'll say, you're entering Pound Hall, or you're in Arita Hall, or you're whatever. And someone, a family member, I don't want to say who it was, but a close family member who was with him said, hey, Merrick, look, there's Arita Hall. Didn't you work? Weren't you the research assistant for Phil Arita? And he turned around and looked at her, this family member, I'm not going to say who it was, and he shot her the meanest, sharpest stare and told her kind of to be quiet. And this is when he was still a judge in the appellate court. And he shot her that look. And it was a look that I could read of, I don't want anyone to really focus on the fact that I'm a conservative. I don't really want anyone to really focus on the fact that I was a law student working for Phil Arita, who was an excellent professor of antitrust, but also a conservative, no big deal. But the look was, this could hurt my career, lady. Don't say that. I'll never forget that look. And so I kind of was like, wow, this guy's kind of a, douchebag, but he was lovely to the students. So I kind of, wrote it off as, you know what, people have their moments. He wanted to shut down and silence his little lady person, who I'm not going to say what his relationship was. So I had that in my mind. And then he steps into office and gets sworn in. And I was so hopeful that he would do the right thing. I was so hopeful that, in fact, in the preface to my book, when it came out, Big Dirty Money in hardback, it came out in the fall of 2020. And so in I was very hopeful. Let me actually back this up. It came out in the fall of 2020, but the paperback came out the year later in the fall of 2021. And by then, in the fall of 21, I still remained hopeful that he would do the right thing, guys. But I'm going to share with you what I said in July, what I wrote in the Washington Monthly. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is there's news now. There are people writing. I think there's a piece in Politico, and everyone's saying, look, this is on Merrick Garland. And I know some people will say, why are we pointing fingers going forward to resist this? That should be our focus. But remember, I'm not in an advocacy space. I report, and I am not going to shut up now when I was one of the first people warning Merrick and telling him to step the F up. Okay, so let me show you the first thing I wrote, one of the first things I wrote, and I'm going to share this with you because, this is the easiest way to do it. And I'm keeping my eye out for my friend Jesse to show up in 4 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to do this right now. I think that I've got this. You can see this, right? You can see this piece. It says, starting with Trump, it's time for a white collar crackdown. You see that, right? And I'm going to scroll up. You can probably see the date of this is May 6th, 2021. The subtitle here is, this week, a federal judge slammed Bill Barr over the Mueller investigation. Hopefully, Merrick Garland's Justice Department will stay on Barr and give financial crimes the attention they deserve. So this is a piece about wanting a white collar crime crackdown. And to the credit, I'm just going to move myself over here, to the credit of the Justice Department, mostly the Deputy Attorney General, Lisa Monaco. By the way, Merrick Garland doesn't hire the Deputy Attorney General. She was appointed separately by Joe Biden. There has been a white collar crackdown. They put together some task forces and they're doing a better job, notwithstanding the fact that there still is this crazy little habit of finding a bank guilty for money laundering, helping, drug cartels, but somehow, no executives knew. Still a problem, but there has been more of a crackdown, and that is good. But let me share with you the problem, though. What I was really focused on in this piece, and I'm going to scroll down here. And by the way, if you want to read this after, maybe Susan Thompson, who's always good at dropping things in the chat, might want to drop this link into the chat. Actually, why should she have to do that? I can walk and chew gum at the same time. Guys, there is the link. Boom. Okay. So let's look at this. We've got this. I'm going back to this. Starting with, I think I just gave you a different link just then. I've got 2 different pieces that I am going to share with you. So let me just make sure I share the appropriate link. So this is the main one. Let me throw this one right now in here to make sure you have both links. Let's see if I did that right, guys. Oh, thank you so much for your support. Okay, I've got time for the white collar crime. Susan had to leave. Okay, Jason, that's okay. I've got 2 different links I threw in the chat. Okay, so there you've got it. So let me share with you. I'm going to scroll down and tell you what I was talking about here. And I want to do this until I'm good. Jesse's not here. I'm going to share this with you guys about Merrick Garland. Okay, so I wrote this piece. Oops, shoot. And here we go. So remember, this was Judge Amy Berman Jackson. And I said at the time that she delivered a significant victory in for anti-corruption advocates. And she ordered at that point, this is huge. This is in May of 2021, just a couple months after Merrick Garland took office. Judge Jackson ordered the DOJ to hand over the full memo that Bill Barr claimed to have relied on when he decided not to charge President Trump with obstructing the Mueller investigation. And this was what I called a fair but brutal dressing down of Bill Barr. And she confirmed, I believe, at the time, our worst suspicions that the fix had been in to clear Trump. The fact that he would not be prosecuted was a given, is what she wrote. I then, at that time, said that Attorney General Merrick Garland was at an inflection point. I wrote that he will either deliver that internal memo from the Barr Justice Department to CREW, the Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, who brought this lawsuit, or he could appeal the decision. Now, the problem here is he did share part of it, but was heavily redacted. Now, I talked a little more about white collar crime here and my problems with enforcement. And then I said, let me scrolling down here, what the Justice Department needed to do. And I said, 1, they have to pursue the obstruction case against Donald Trump. I said 2, right? Because remember, he was out of office. I'm writing this in May. I said 2, that Biden himself should provide clear direction, cracking down on white collar crime as a priority. He should have said those words himself, something that George W. Bush, Bush Jr. did after Enron. Okay, similar to what his father did after the savings and loan crisis. Fine. And I also said, third, that Merrick Garland should make individual accountability a reality, not just words on paper, right? Not just in this data, from Duke Law professor Brandon Garrett, he noted that individuals were charged alongside just 27% of the 497, these deferred prosecution agreements. Okay. Now, I also said, let me just change this for 1 second. I'm going to, there's Jesse. I'm going to, before I bring Jesse on stage, I know this is music to his ears. One more thing, because I was so upset about what Merrick Garland did, you guys. I wrote another piece, and I think I am still, I got to go back to my sharing the screen with you, and I will let Jesse on stage, but he's used to me talking probably too much. The next piece I wrote in June, I was on a roll. Why is Merrick Garland defending Bill Barr's policies, you guys? And I said, Biden's attorney general is siding with Donald Trump's Justice Department on everything from the Mueller report to a rape accusation. Now, I'm going to say, and I'm going to stop here to let Jesse on, but my metaphor here was that it was, and my friends here in this audience, you remember the Tylenol scares. I said that Merrick Garland was in his Tylenol moment. This was his chance to recognize that the Justice Department was utterly poisoned, and that you don't regain public trust. For example, in Tylenol, when there is cyanide in it, you don't leave it on the shelf and say it's fine. And I wanted him to clean house and get rid of the poison in the department instead of trying to smooth things over and act like everything was fine. And I could go on and on about this. And as I said, it's important to recognize what got us to the point that Donald Trump is once again going to be in the Oval Office instead of a federal prison. But that will be for a little bit of another day, because I want to introduce to you my friend Jesse Eisinger. As I have said, he is a Pulitzer Prize winning reporter from ProPublica, and now he has even a bigger job. I think he actually has people who report to him as reporters over there. He also wrote the fabulous book, The Chicken Shit Club, which we can talk about at some point. But today we are bringing him on because I saw on Twitter, which I still call it, that he had given a speech or a talking to his team at ProPublica about what the road ahead looks like as an investigative journalist. So I am going to bring him on and ask him to talk about that. And then I know that you all have questions. And so if you want to ask them in the chat, that would be fabulous. So here we go. Hey, Jesse.
Hi. Hey, Jen. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I mean, things suck, but I'm glad to see you. How are you?
Yeah, well, tired and anxious, but hanging in there.
Now, where are you seated? I mean, it's an interesting bookcase. It's like everything's on a slope. I'm not sure what that top, like why you.
Yeah, it's like a brownstone, so everything's tilted.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm in my house. Yeah,
Okay.
In Brooklyn. Yeah. In
Cool.
Brownstone, Brooklyn. It's technically a little townhouse.
Now, I don't think that I have Zoomed with you since the COVID era when you were growing out a very impressive, Rasputin beard. What happened to that?
Good recollection. Yeah, I did have a no haircut, no shaving policy for a long time, and then I ended up looking like a hermit. And it's very entertaining to look at.
Isn't it fun to go back?
I gained about 10 years. It took 10 years off my life when I shaved and got a haircut. It's amazing.
Oh my
God. I've gained them back since. But
yeah, I had the opposite thing. I had a no healthy eating policy during COVID.
Wise.
And I was wise, and I became an expert in this incredible flourless chocolate cake covered in raspberry, and I will never ever make it again, because it took like years to take off the what do they call it in German? They call it grief bacon. There's a word for
Oh,
it.
really?
Yeah, I
That's
don't know what the
amazing.
German is, but besides Schadenfreude, that's like my favorite German word, whatever grief bacon is. And friends, you can throw it in the chat. I'm sorry. Okay, so Jesse, can you please, for folks who don't know sort of about ProPublica, what you do, can you lay that out and talk about what you said yesterday? Because it kind of lit everybody on fire. They're very happy to hear it, but I want to hear what you're doing at ProPublica and why you're not scared out of your mind.
Sure. So, we're a nonprofit investigative news organization. We have about 200 people and about 150 journalists all around the country, and we've right now got a pretty healthy budget and a good reserve. So, we're in a pretty strong position to do what we've always done with um, powerful entities, the government, corporations, wealthy people, which is to hold power to account. Um, and we're in a much better position now than we were in 2016, and I can get into that in a second. But I now am an editor. I edit what we call our democracy team. I've
Okay.
got a collection of reporters. My reporters did the Clarence Thomas, Sam Alito reporting
Oh my gosh. Yes, let
in
me just break for
2023.
1 second. People get mad when I interrupt. I'm no Joe
That's fine.
Scarborough, but I will do this. You guys remember that the reporting that Jesse's talking about his team did all the pictures of Clarence Thomas out on a yacht, right?
Yes.
His and I'm forgetting what his benefactor's name was for a moment.
Well, the main one was a
There's two.
Texas billionaire named Harlan Crow.
Harlan Crow, right?
But we also wrote that Clarence Thomas had a coterie of billionaires giving him gifts and travel for decades, including Wayne Heisinger of Blockbuster fame, if you remember him, and
Yes.
Waste Management,
Yes.
and a variety of others. So Harlan was only the latest and greatest. And then we broke the story that Sam Alito had taken a trip paid for, arranged by Leonard Leo, who's
Oh, we know
probably
Leonard
one of,
Leo.
yeah.
Yes.
And we did a big story on Leonard Leo. I think the definitive piece and podcast about it called "We Don't Talk About Leonard,"
That's so good.
with On the Media, and I hope your listeners sort of check that out. I think it's a great podcast.
Say about it
In the,
again. Tell me the name of the podcast.
the name of the podcast is "We Don't Talk About Leonard."
Yep.
Because people just did not talk about Leonard Leo and all of his power and influence, and we really traced his career and how he wields power, which was real kind of bully pulpit kind of stick wielding. And the revelation in that podcast was that Leo, who's the known chiefly as the architect of the supermajority on the Supreme Court of conservative justices,
Right.
he helped place Trump's Supreme Court justices, three of them. But more than that, he really understood that it wasn't enough to have the majority on the Supreme Court. He realized that they needed the right cases. And you needed the right judges to have the right rulings to bring the right cases to the Supreme Court. So he was placing decades before Democrats even realized that this was really
So
in
it's like the
play.
factory line. It's a production.
Yes,
It's
it was a production line.
fascinating.
So
Yeah.
he placed state attorneys general. He placed state Supreme Court justices. Placed district court justices and appellate court justices. So he really created a machine to get the right cases to the Supreme Court. And that
So I'm
machine
sorry,
is
let me back
going,
up. So you've it's like the pipeline, and then you just put the stuff through. It's incredible.
yes.
Yep.
And then you bring the case, then your activists bring the cases to the right judges,
Like has
or
merit in the
better.
Fifth Circuit. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Or
exactly.
better what?
Or better to have an AG, because states have better standing typically in courts. You'll know this better than I do. And so they're looked upon as better plaintiffs to bring cases.
Right.
And so if you have state AGs that's a very effective mechanism to bring the right cases. And so we trace that, and I really recommend that to your listeners. The
Yes.
Clarence Thomas coverage and the Lido coverage, thankfully, got a lot of play, and the Leo stuff that we didn't get as much attention, but were a finalist for a DuPont award. So we just
I
found
love
that
this.
out
So again, you
yesterday.
guys, it's called We Don't Talk About Leonard, and
Leonard, yeah,
we just put it
with
right in
On the Media.
on the media, not to be confused with Fat Leonard, a whole other story
No,
about
another fabulous story.
another Leonard. Okay, so let's wind it back
So
to what
sure.
you do at ProPublica. Yeah.
So ProPublica, we did not have local affiliates back in 2016. We had about a third of the budget that we have today. We didn't have our bureaus. We have bureaus now in the Southeast, the Southwest, the Northwest, the Midwest. So we are
That's incredible. How did you build up those local news places?
Well, what we
Reporting
did
and
was, and I wasn't, I was an observer of this and a cheerleader for it, but not the architect of it. But we realized that the true deficit of investigative reporting was in local.
yes,
And that was the founding principle that there was a crisis in investigative reporting in particular when the founders of ProPublica created it back in 2008, and I joined in 2009. So I was one of the early hires back when we might have had about 20 people. Now we have about 200, as I say. I think we're spending about 3 or 4 million that year. This year we have a budget of about 45 or 50 million.
right.
And we have all these local. So what we do is we generally sort of do two things. We have bureaus with reporters at ProPublica on ProPublica's salary, and then we
Okay,
also have something called the local reporting network, where local reporters pitch us stories, and we help them edit and we publish together. And we do that all across the country. And we've got a 50-state initiative going on now to have coverage in all of 50 states.
mm-hmm.
And so that gives us an ability to cover the federal government and what it does in a way that few outlets can today, because what we can do is cover the policies as they are made in Washington and also the effects in the rest of the country. And so that's what we're planning to do. And what I told my staff, I have
Yes,
a staff of 5. It was a short speech. I think that there's an exhaustion, and there's with the idea of trying to cover this administration
right,
again, doing the same thing over again. And I think that there's some trepidation about what could happen.
right,
And what I said was, of course, I share that. But now this is our professional obligation, and it is our moral obligation to cover the powerful and to hold them to account. And what I said is, this is the time of the greatest test of our professional lives, because
mm-hmm.
we have always talked about holding power to account. But now this is an administration, and Trump is a president who has talked directly about threatening the free press and attacking the free press. And this is what his minions do. And they are not a believer in an aggressive press. And so we're going to have to face the possibility that we face something that people in the Philippines or Russia or in other repressive countries have faced as journalists, which is true threats and true harassment. And now we're going to be tested.
Right,
And what I said to them is, when we said this, when we said we were going to hold powerful to account, did we mean it? Did we
right,
mean it when we were going to be potentially harassed and
right.
sued and threatened potentially with violence? Let's knock on wood that
And I
doesn't
have
happen.
this right here. I know this is weird. It's kind of my Twitter page, but this is what Brian Steltzer, I'm saying his name correctly, said. He said what you said. We face the biggest test of our professional lives. Now we get to see if we really meant it when we said we will hold power to account. We will do so when our subjects have true power on their side and a willingness, will we do so when our subjects have true power on their side and a willingness to use it? We may be harassed. We may be sued. We may be threatened with violence. We may be ignored. Are we just sunshine journalists, or are we ready? You skipped one thing that concerns me the most. You said, will there be violence used against us? Jesse, I mean, this guy admires Vladimir Putin and Viktor Orban, and I'm not going to say it out loud because I won't fearmonger, but there is, the subtext of this is, we've seen what happens to journalists in those regimes. And I remember something that you said to me back when you visited Vermont Law School when I was teaching there. We had that column on street crime and white collar crime. And you also were so generous and came to my white collar crime class. And one of the students asked you this great question. I often repeat it myself in the answer in various forms. But someone said, well, do you think your journalism, what you do, will actually make a difference? And do you remember what you said?
I don't. I've answered this in a variety of ways.
Oh my God. You said, yeah, probably. You're like, probably not. But you were kind of like, but this is what I do. Some people watch sports. Like, you can't help yourself. Like, you are, in your core being, an investigative journalist. This is what you want to do. This is what you're focused on. And if the outcome doesn't change, I mean, are you really going to, for example, with white collar crime, is your book, The Chicken Shit Club, is your reporting on Clarence Thomas going to result in his impeachment? No, it's not. But you still do it. And your response is, because I enjoy it. Do you enjoy this enough to risk your life, essentially?
Well, that's the question. And let's be clear.
You have
it's
kids.
Very important not to be self-aggrandizing.
I know. I get that.
About this. And
right.
We're not under that kind of threat now.
Okay.
And it's not about us, it's about the work we produce, and the work we produce has to be rigorous and fair-minded and intellectually honest, but also very clear-eyed and very aggressive when it's warranted. And that's what we will try to do, and I hope that we meet the challenge. And what I wanted to do is buck up my reporters and buck myself up.
Yes.
For this challenge. We are flawed as humans, and as an institution. ProPublica is flawed, and the media is flawed. And we have vulnerabilities, and we can be attacked on the basis of those vulnerabilities. And this is what they do, is they're very good at identifying our flaws and vulnerabilities and using our professionalism against us, because we have professional standards and we must adhere to them. And just as Merrick Garland has professional standards, and Bob Mueller had professional standards, and people with no scruples can exploit people with standards and scruples.
Exactly.
But we're not going to lose those. We're going to adhere to those, because we think those are more important than any one kind of cause or any one story.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think people, I always default to logic, okay? And I realize that's not everyone's set point, but let me just try some logic out on you here, Jesse. When you talk about when you hold yourself to a certain standard and you try to approach it, but you're never going to meet it, any little mistake that's made, any error of judgment, any slight corruption, is then you say, you've made one mistake, then therefore you are as bad as people who are just rabidly self-interested, dangerous, hoarders or whatever. But the analogy I often make is a doctor. If you went to the most talented, board-certified surgeon for, let's say, cancer surgery, what have you, and they had performed countless numbers of these surgeries, and sometimes things go wrong, and their success rate is 99.9%. But one day an error happens in the surgery, and someone unfortunately dies on the table. Let's compare that to a quack doctor operating out of, some back room somewhere, claiming that they can cure cancer with herbal medicine and leeches. That is what we're talking. I mean, sometimes what we're talking about, right? And those people who are funding that say, well, look, you think your godlike doctor is great. They've done so many surgeries. Those 5 people died. How is it any different than what we're doing? And I just don't understand why it's so hard for people to see that. And it's always been clear to me. What do you think is going on with the public's, well, there's two questions. I guess I want to start there and then pivot for a second. What do you think? Why is it so hard for people to think logically around those kinds of issues?
Well, I think we haven't fully grappled or understood in the mainstream media, and we're sort of mainstream media adjacent,
Right.
what the information environment of most people
Okay.
are.
Let's go there.
I think that there is we're living in a kind of post-fact, post-truth. And actually, my wife, who works at the Washington Post, Sarah Ellison, covers this much more extensively than I do. She covers misinformation in the media. But I think that facts and logic and investigative journalism to some extent has become a luxury good for elites. And people who are holding down two jobs and worried about the price of eggs don't have time to read very long, in-depth stories. And so the challenge for us is to try to reach people where they live about stories that affect their lives.
Right.
And I don't think we've done a particularly great job at that. And we also need to grapple with working in new media and trying to see if we can reach people where they're watching and listening. More people are listening to Joe Rogan than
That's right.
reading ProPublica. Um,
I have an
and
idea as we're talking. Can we brainstorm right now on
sure,
this? Okay. So as you're talking about, I'm thinking, Joe Rogan. I'm also thinking about Tim Pool and his $400,000 a month gig, right? Here's an analogy and then here's a proposal. When the New York Times came out with that big blockbuster like story about going into Donald Trump's financial background, the thing where they said that, the Trump empire, Fred Trump, maybe had not paid
yeah,
$400 million in taxes. I remember when that came out, I'm like, you guys totally effed that up. They thought that releasing an entire issue in print was all at once was going to work. And they didn't tease it out through social media or whatever. And I know how tacky what I'm saying is, but I think I understood how information is consumed, right? And so my proposal for you is, I don't know, do you guys even have a face on YouTube? In other words, there's two different jobs. I mean, there's obviously
yeah.
right. What you guys do, you cannot be sitting doing what someone like me is doing every day. I'm willing to have a segment on my offering this as if it's an offer. This is totally benefiting me, right? So having a segment every day on my show, like the ProPublica Spotlight, and just saying, here's what they're doing. You don't have to pay me. This is not a transaction, but I'm saying there are people like me. And I know right now, Jesse, I started my own channel here just in August. I was doing stuff on Mary's station. I'm independent now. And I only have, thank you guys, 6,000 subscribers. But I've done the math and my projections. And a year from now, I'm going to have close to 100,000, right? I know Joe Rogan, but there are more people like me. What do you think? Can you talk to your people in the hires up? Should I have a little I can do it without your permission, but it'd be nice to have one of you come on.
Well, I mean, I think that that's something that we should think about and do. And we have a social media operation. I don't actually know if we've done some stuff on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel. I don't think it gets.
Do you have TikTok?
We're on TikTok. We're on all social media.
Okay, got you.
And we're growing, and we've got I'm a dinosaur. We've got young people who know how to communicate on these media doing it. But there is, the algorithms don't necessarily promote us, and so to some extent we have to try to figure out how to work around the algorithms.
Yes, I have ideas. Maybe offline I can give you the little tips. But yes,
I would love. I would
maybe
love
the way
tips,
is
and
maybe the way is I
introduce
just
you to
yeah.
our social media folks.
How about I do this? I just do it on my own. I don't need your permission because there's no copyright issue of me talking about and promoting your stories. You guys would love that. And then if it works, if my secret plan works, they can reach out to me, right? I don't have time to reach out to your social media youngsters.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, yeah, and also our stuff is Creative Commons, almost all of it. So, so it's not under copyright. So
I love it.
we want people to steal our stories.
Oh my God, I didn't even know that. I'm always giving you guys credit, but I always feel bad about taking too much of a picture or whatever. Okay, I got you.
No, that's okay. That's okay. But we do
Amazing.
want credit. Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
duh.
Yeah.
Okay. So before we go, I'm going to look at the chat. And friends, what questions do you have for my friend Jesse and ProPublica? What kind of reporting are you hoping to see? What are your concerns actually about going forward into this new administration or about the election? I got Susie Jones who said, I just spilled liquid creamer all over the floor and my feet sticky, something flipping mess, but I'm anyway. So that is not a question for you. That is just something happening. Okay. What questions do you have for Jesse, guys? Okay, people are just chatting among themselves. It's so fun. We have a good community here.
That's great.
Okay. Yoel Adama said, thank you, everybody. I'm taking notes. A lot of good information and insights. Okay, I got something. One last question before you go, Jesse. A lot of people, especially my Black women friends and people who I don't even know, are done. They're so angry about the results of this election. And I don't necessarily want you to speak to that, but I'm noticing communities becoming really divided and finger pointing, like, why didn't this group vote for Kamala Harris and now it's on you? And I wonder whether you think that will fade. Is that something you're going to report on at all? Because there is now this sort of fracturing of the electorate. And I know you're in the Democracy Project. I don't know how much you report on the ways that the electorate behaves in response to these kinds of what many would think of disturbing and surprising outcomes. Is that something you do? And that's kind of complicated.
Yeah, well, I should have said this from the outset
Okay.
and make it clear, which is that we are, ProPublica is not part of the resistance, the hashtag resistance.
Right.
We're journalists, and we
I
hold
love that.
power to account, and we held the Biden administration to account, and we held the Obama administration to account. We wrote on the housing failures of the Obama administration. My reporter wrote on the State Department coddling Israel as it prosecuted its war and may have committed war crimes in Gaza.
Right.
And so we go to where the stories are. But obviously, there are myriad political stories to be done about how Trump won,
Right.
how Trump gathered this kind of new coalition, how he flipped Latino voters. And we should think about those kinds of stories. We don't do sort of political stories. That's not in our DNA. And we don't do the kind of like inside the White House story. So we're not going to be writing on the ups and downs of the chief of staff of the Trump
I mean, that's
administration.
access journalism, and that
Right.
what that comes with. You can't do that. Yeah. I get it.
We don't do sort of how did Trump win political stories, but what we should be doing and we will be doing is what is life like in America for people and what are they actually seeing? Because the top line economic numbers, GDP, unemployment, wage growth, those ostensibly look good, and there's an undercurrent of anger and disappointment because institutions have failed people over the course of decades now. Something that I've written about, something that you've written about.
Right.
I think we're still living in the aftermath of the Great Recession of
Of
2008
course.
and
Yes.
and the COVID crisis. And so these crises have collapsed trust in institutions. And that's where we come in to try to write about it. And going to your point, like we must write about it. It's our obligation. And whether anybody pays attention to us now or in the moment is not something we can be overly concerned about because we're not trying to gather audience for economic reasons. We're not trying to gather advertisers. We're not trying to get people to subscribers to pay us. We need donors, but what we really need to do is do our work, and that's what we're going to do.
I appreciate you so much. And before we wrap the show and go, the last segment I usually do, I've not done it for 2 days, is something called Crazy Town. So if you wanna stick around, it will just take 30 seconds. It involves some music and a video, and then we will wave goodbye. Are you game? Okay.
I'm game. I'm
Okay,
always game for Crazy Town.
Crazy Town. it was, unfortunately, Ted Cruz won re-election. I'm just going to say, unfortunately, you don't need to say that. And what's really super funny is Ted Cruz's daughter on stage, kind of mouthing. You can read, even if you don't read lips, her saying, "Don't clap," to her mother, and her eyes rolling. So let's play that.
Hope and pray that Donald Trump will be reelected as president of the United States.
Let's look at her face again. I'm getting enough of that. Okay. I'm going to remove her from the stage. Thank you so much for joining me, Jesse, and have a great day. Thanks,
Absolutely.
everybody.
Thanks for having me.
I'll see you Monday, you guys, at 8 a.m. sharp. Bye.
Bye.